here. So the very first thing we're going to do is I'm going to presume you've basically done no note input into Dorico at all. I'm going to presume you haven't changed any shortcuts. I'm going to presume you're using Dorico as if you've opened it for the first time today. You've opened this file, and this is where we're going from. So very quickly, we've got these 5 modes across the top: setup, write, engrave, play, and print, and we should be in write mode. So if you have clicked on anything else, like setup mode, for example, make sure you've chosen write mode, and you should see these notes on the left-hand side on this panel here. And you should see, obviously, the notes and the staves in front of you. You can use your mouse to zoom around if you want to. If you've got a trackpad, you can use that to zoom around as well. There are options for zooming in and zooming out. So if it's not big enough for what you want to do, you can use the Z key to zoom in, and you can use the X key to zoom out. There's also, for people who like to use them, in the bottom right-hand corner, there's some zoom controls down here. So in the bottom right corner, mine says 200% at the moment, but there's a plus and a minus button. So if you want to use those, maybe 200% is about right for this particular file. And we're going to start with this section here. A good place to start, indeed. The beginning is a very good place to start. So what I want you to do is double click on the staff here. So this empty staff, for every case, we've got a staff at the top, which is showing us what we're going to be inputting. And underneath, we've got an empty staff, which we'll be using to then add notes to. So I'm going to double click on the staff here, and you should get an orange caret line like this. And you should also find you get this little grey ghost note. So as you kind of wave your mouse over the staff, you get this little grey ghost note. I don't particularly like this little grey ghost note, and I will be turning it off shortly. But initially, we're going to use this one. If you don't have this little grey ghost note, you might find that in the top left corner up here, this little arrow this icon has turned blue. If it's turned blue, you don't have a little ghost note. If you tick it or click on it so it's not blue, then you should get this little ghost note like this, and then you can see it dancing around the staff like that. So you've got that option there, and then you can use that if you want to click on notes and click them onto the staff. So what we're going to do is, if you find, for example, if we're going to copy the line above, so if you click on the G like this, then you'll get a note input here, and the caret line will move on. So very simple to start off with, and the reason it does that is that on the left-hand side over here, we have the quarter note lit up here. And because the quarter note's lit up, that's what we've input on the staff with our little ghost note when I've clicked on the staff. And you can see there's a rhythm grid here. So the rhythm grid is showing me the strong and weak beats on the bar, so I can see exactly where to click. If you have made any mistakes, or you think that wasn't quite right, I've clicked in the wrong place, or you want to go back, then in the top right-hand corner, there is an undo button. So this little arrow here, so the little speaker icon, just to the right of the speaker icon, or to the left of this help icon, there's an undo. So if you've made a mistake, you can click undo and you can go back, and then you can click that quarter note in at the beginning. So if you've done that one, now what we want to do is enter an 8th note. So I'm going to choose the 8th note on the left-hand side. It says 8th note bracket quaver. I'm presuming most of you are not in the UK and you'd prefer me not to say quaver or hemi-demi-semi-quaver at any point in these sessions. So I will aim not to. I will aim to remember it's quarter notes and 8th notes today. So if I now click in the staff down here, then I can enter that 8th note. So that's all good so far. And now I want to go back to quarter note. And I can click in the staff, and I can enter that. And you see, I've not needed to enter the rest at all, and I don't need to enter this rest either. I can just choose a quarter note, and I can choose on the rhythm grid here where I want to click that, and I can click that note in. Now, for the next ones, of course, I don't need any rests anyway, so I'm just going to click in these notes with my mouse, and I can input notes this way, and then when I get to the next quarter note, I can switch back to quarter note, and I can do that. So that's the first kind of, simple. Continue if you wish, if you want to continue to the end. I know some people, you want to make sure it's complete. And to be honest, we've done this as a 4-bar phrase so that you kind of, had enough practice of doing each of these little particular things. When you've got to the end and you want to stop inputting notes, because you've got this caret line and you've got this grey dot, this grey ghost note, The problem is if you click anywhere else, you're going to start inputting notes and you don't want to do that. And if you've accidentally clicked in a white space down here, you'll get a note with a really long stem and long ledger lines and things like that, and you don't want that either. So to make sure you're not inputting notes anymore, either press the Enter key on your keyboard or Escape in the top left corner. It's your choice. You can press Enter or Escape, and that will turn the caret line off. So when the caret line is there, you're inputting notes. When the caret line is not there, then you're editing the notes that are already here. So I can now choose a note, or I can click on the staff, for example, and I'm not inputting notes. But if the caret line is there, if I double click on the staff, or actually Enter will turn the caret line on and off. And I can press Escape to also turn the caret line off if you prefer Escape. And some people, especially if you used Sibelius before, you might prefer to press Escape. Somebody's asked in the chat, how did you create the rest? I didn't create the rest. There's no need to create rests. So all I'm doing is I've added the caret line here so that I'm inputting notes. And when I choose a note from here and I click on the staff, it will enter a note. When I choose an eighth note here and I skip over this bit and I just go to this point here, so this is the beat 2.5 in the bar, then I can choose here. I've now got the eighth note underneath the rhythm grid here. So I'm following this rhythm grid, or following the notes above, because obviously it's the same rhythm written above. So I don't need to enter that rest at all. If you click in that space, then you'll get a note in there, and you don't need to. For people who really, really want them, there is a rest key, and there is a rest button down here on the left-hand side, but really there's no need to use it. There really is no need to use it, especially when you're doing mouse input like this. Now, the mouse input bit is not the most accurate. It's not the quickest way of doing things, but I know it's a method that people often start with. So I thought we'd start at the beginning, and then we're going to leave mouse input and probably carry on with many other options that you can use for inputting notes if you want to. And we're going to use some shortcuts for things. We're also going to use, if you have a MIDI keyboard, then we'll also show you some options for that. You don't have to have one, but if you have one, then I'll show you some options for that as well. So if you've now got to this point, then press Enter or Escape to turn the caret line off so that there's no rhythm grid showing up there and there's no caret line at the end. So press Enter or Escape. How does it handle inserting a 30-second note when the grid is based on eighth notes? You're jumping way ahead. One of these later sections that we'll get to today will be explaining about the rhythm grid and how we can enter all sorts of other things. I like the way you're thinking, but let's not do that right now. Where is the eraser is one of the questions. There's an undo button at the top. So to start, I would say you can use the undo button. If you've made a mistake and you've got the wrong pitch, then you can drag these if you want to with your mouse. So you can drag notes that way, and you can drag them up and down. So if you put in the wrong pitch by accident, when the caret line is off, because if the caret line's on, you're inputting more notes. When the caret line is off, you can drag a note and you can drag it up and down if you've put it in the wrong place. And we'll be doing lots more edits of things a bit later on. So we'll show you lots more edit options for how we can do those. But if you get the general idea, if you can input notes, even if they're not exactly correct, then we'll move on and we'll carry on. How is the caret correctly spelled? Well, it's orange, but it's not C-A-R-R-O-T, C-A-R-E-T, I believe, which is a bit like the as they used to say, the flashing cursor that you used to get in Microsoft Word. But you have to be very careful with the phrase flashing cursor, because otherwise it's a cursing flasher. So we'll carry on for the next section. So the next one, entering notes using an on-screen keyboard. Now, we're not really going to do much of this, I'll be completely honest, but I wanted to include it just in case. Is there anybody, and if you are, write in the chat and say you're using an iPad. Are you using Dorico on iPad? I'm presuming most people are not. I saw one hand. Somebody says yes. Okay, so this is really just for the people using the iPad. And if anybody's thinking this session's going too slowly, we're going to speed up, don't worry. So wouldn't waste my money on an iPad. Fair enough. It's not everybody's taste, but just in case, and just because it's included, and just in case people have an iPad and you want to use it, at the bottom of the screen, on the desktop or the iPad, you can click on this little arrow. There's a tiny little arrow at the bottom. And if you choose that, this thing pops up, which is the lower zone. I'm not allowed to call it the bottom panel. It's the lower zone. And there is a keyboard icon on the left-hand side over here. And if you click on the keyboard icon, you get this piano keyboard. If you are following in the notes, it says the on-screen piano keyboard, you can also use the shortcut Control or Command 8. So if you're on Windows, it's Control. If you're on a Mac, it's Command. So if you do Command or Control 8, the number 8, then that will hide and show the lower zone, and it contains a number of items, but we want the piano keyboard. So now, if you have an iPad, this is going to be potentially a useful way of doing note input. If you're using a mouse, this is not a useful way of doing the note input unless you have a touch screen. Yes, input is possible using the QWERTY keyboard, Christopher. You're still jumping ahead. Hang on a second, I'll get there. Don't panic. Don't panic. So, entering notes using the on-screen keyboard, double click and you've got your caret line. You can do this on the iPad. Now, on the iPad, it would be more sensible to click on the notes on the screen here. You can also choose your note values here, and that's because if you're using an iPad, then you will find that your fingers don't want to keep going over here to choose a note value and then down here to the piano keyboard. So we've put a row of the note values here as well. They're just duplicates, okay? So if you've got those, then you can choose a note value and you can tap on the screen and you can enter notes. So you can also move the caret line along. So you can choose an eighth note, you can move the caret line along, and you can tap on notes this way. I'm presuming most people are not going to do this, but if you do have an iPad, you can do this. Choose an eighth note, move the caret along by an eighth note, and then enter the next note. And then you can just tap on this piano keyboard and you can enter notes. Sometimes people really like using it on a desktop. If you are a teacher and you have an interactive whiteboard in front of you when you're teaching a class, this can be a really useful option in a class, but it really is an interactive screen option. If you want a bigger or smaller keyboard, there is a button on the right-hand side, and you can drag this to make a really tall or a shorter piano. So there are all sorts of options for that. But if you're using an iPad, that is going to be a really useful input method, especially if you don't have a QWERTY keyboard attached to your MIDI keyboard, attached to your iPad. If you have a QWERTY keyboard, it's very much the same as the desktop version, which I'm sure most people on this call are probably using. There's a quick hand from Phil Sterling. Do you want to ask a question without typing in the chat? Or could you type it in the chat? There's
There
a
we go. Can you hear
from
me?
Linda first that just says, can't see the keyboard icon. It's down here on the left, Linda. So if you've got this lower zone, click on this arrow down here, and then the keyboard icon is here. Sorry, Phil, you got a question?
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I have an iMac laptop, and it has a touch screen. So you mentioned if you're inputting on an iPad, do you also mean something like this?
Yeah, anything that has a touchscreen on it. Normally, it'd be a
Yeah.
Windows Surface. I don't think there's many Macs that natively have a touchscreen apart from an iPad. But yeah,
Just
Windows
so it,
Surface. But any touchscreen, if you have one, yes, you can use that for
okay.
note input if you want to. I still think the quickest options are going to be using a QWERTY keyboard or a MIDI keyboard, which we'll look at both of those options as well. But you have those options. Somebody's also just pointed out the on-screen keyboard is screwy. C3 and C4 are incorrectly named. That's because in Dorico you can change what middle C is called. I bet all of yours probably says C4. Yes, and that's because notation software tends to say C4. There are all sorts of reasons, which I won't go into right now, why middle C can be C3, C4, or C5, depending on which company you're following. However, purely because I've been working with lots of external sound libraries, I've switched mine to C3 because the things I'm working with happen to be middle C. And I'm sorry, so I got mine the wrong way around. In the preferences, I'm just going to switch mine back so it's the same as yours. In the Dorico preferences for general, you can say that middle C is C3, C4, or C5, depending on your personal preference. C4, you're correct. Who was that? It was Chuck. Thank you, Chuck. You're correct. C4 is middle C. So that it's the same as everybody else's. There you go. When you tend to work with Yamaha devices, they tend to say C3 is middle C. There are reasons I won't go into it right now because it doesn't matter. The zoom interface blocks our ability to see the bottom of the Dorico interface. I thought it was supposed to show everything, so I apologize for that. I'll make a note of that. So if I go near the bottom of the screen, I will show you. So I'm going to move on from using the on-screen keyboard because we want to use some other options. So now we're going to use now there's a couple of options here. So we're going to use a couple of these. So I'm going to get rid of this lower zone. I'm going to click on there's a little arrow at the bottom of the screen. Hopefully it's not too hidden, or I can use Command 8 or Control 8 on PC. So now in section 3, if you double click at the beginning of the staff, now I'm going to give you a couple of other options here, and the next one is going to be more finale-like, by which I mean Dorico by default is looking for you to choose a duration and then choose the pitch, and that's what we were doing with the mouse. You were choosing a duration on the left-hand side, and then you were entering it with the mouse. We're going to switch it over in section 4 so that you can do it the other way around, which is more finale-like. Hands up if you've used finale before. That's what I thought. So bear with me in section 3 because that's the Dorico default, and then I'll show you how we can switch it over and you can do it the other way. There are reasons to do one or the other. I sometimes like a bit of one and a lot of the other, but I'll show you options for doing that. But in section 3, we're going to go with the Dorico default way of doing things, and then in section 4, we'll switch it over. And the idea of this session is that you can then choose your own preference for how you would like to do this as you're using Dorico. And actually, in different projects, I might do things in different ways for different reasons. So what I'm now going to do is explain to you some of the other shortcuts. So if you're following along in the notes page as well, the Word file, this says that for section 3, we're going to use these numbers for the note durations, and we can use A to G for pitches. So I'm not using a MIDI keyboard right now, but what I'm going to do is use the computer keyboard, the QWERTY keyboard, to input some notes. So if you have a numeric keypad, the numbers on the right-hand side of your keyboard, then you can use them if you want to, but we couldn't rely on them being there for everybody because if you're using a laptop, many laptops do not have a QWERTY key, that numeric keypad on the right-hand side. You only have the numbers across the top of the keyboard. If you use the numbers across the top of the keyboard, then we wanted to make sure that you could enter really small notes. Let's not say what they're called right now. And we wanted to enter really long notes, and we wanted to get them all in the numbers from 1 to 9. So we've mapped them out this way. Now, this annoys both Sibelius and Finale users because in Sibelius, a quarter note is 4. In Finale, a quarter note is 5. And in Dorico, it's now 6. I'm sorry. I will tell you how to change that if you really want to. However, I'd like to explain why we've done it. And it really is useful because now you can touch type, I think, much more easily, especially when you're using a MIDI keyboard. Because when I was using, for example, when I was using Sibelius, and I've used Finale, but back in kind of Finale 97, 98, it was a long time ago for me. I've used Sibelius for a long time, where you'd use the numeric keypad with your right hand, and some Finale users would also do this, and then you use a MIDI keyboard with your left hand. But I don't know about you, I don't practice enough. I'm not as good with my left hand, even though I've done piano exams. I'm not as good with my left hand as I am entering notes on a MIDI keyboard as I am with my right hand. So if you use your left hand on the numbers across the top of your computer keyboard, then if you put your finger, for example, on 6 for a quarter note and you go left, you will get a shorter note value. Whether you look down or not and realize you're on button 5, it doesn't matter. As you go left, you will get a shorter note value, and as you go right, you'll get a longer note value. And that's the reason we did this, because all computers have that number row across the top, even if whether they have a numeric keypad or not. And that's why we've done it. Now, if you want to map the numeric keypad to be the same as Finale or Sibelius, you can do that, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute. But let's look at how we will do this note input. So I'm going to use these numbers, and I think we only need 5, 6, and 7 anyway for this bit, I think. And I'm going to use the letters A to G on the keyboard, just on my QWERTY keyboard, to enter the pitches. So what I'm going to do here, I've double clicked and I've got this caret line on in section 3. So I'm going to press 6, which actually was already lit, but just to remind me, it's 6. And I'm going to leave my finger, my left finger, on button 6. In fact, let's do it this way. And if I show you, here's my hand down here. It might be a bit small. So let me just make that one a tiny bit bigger. Hang on a second. I think I can do this. Sorry, I should have made this bigger before. Let's try it now. There it was. Right. Now you can see what I'm doing. So I've got my finger on button 6, and I'm going, oh, I've got a note up there I didn't want. Never mind, I'll just undo. There we go. So I've got the caret line on here. I've double clicked with my mouse. I'm going to put my finger on button 6, and then I'm going to enter that G just by pressing G. So I'm going to use my right hand here. And then I'm going to move to button 5 because I want to basically enter that rest. But what I'm going to do is press 5 for an eighth note, and then I'm going to press the space bar, and the caret moves on by an eighth note, and then I'm going to press D. And then I'm going to move my finger back to press 6, and then I'm going to press G. And move back to that one, and then press the space bar. You don't actually have to enter the rest, you just have to move the caret line on, and then I'm going to press D. And then I'm going to press G, D, G, D, and then I'm going to move my finger onto button 6. I'm going to press D. So what I'm doing is I'm only moving between 5 and 6 here. And I don't really need to look at the numbers. I just go left when I want a shorter value, and I go right when I want a longer value. And then I'm using the pitches down here. Now, this is maybe slightly awkward to use the A to G letters down here. If you're really clever, you could do it all with your left hand if your thumb is clever and knows where you're going. But it is, you know, and it's the kind of the method I'd use maybe when I'm on the train. Now, the method that I think is quickest is to use a MIDI keyboard. So I'm going to use a MIDI keyboard for this next bit, and it's very similar. So I'm in this bar here, and I'm going to press 6 because I want a quarter note, and I'm going to press C on the MIDI keyboard. And then I want that, for that eighth note rest, I'm just going to press 5 in the space bar with my left thumb of my left hand, actually. And then I'm going to do this, and then press 7 and finish. I think that is a much easier and quicker way because you're only moving. Now, on my keyboard, obviously, I've got this big gap in the middle. I'm sure most people don't have this. For RSI reasons, I've got one of these keyboards that splits my hands. You've probably got numbers straight across. Maybe I should have used a different keyboard for this. But I'm only using 5, 6, and 7. Across here, and then I'm using the space bar every time I want to enter a rest. I don't actually have to enter a rest. All I'm doing is moving that caret line along. If you've got a MIDI keyboard attached to your computer, then it is, I think, a lot quicker. If you're not sure, just plug your MIDI keyboard in, and all you have to do, nothing else is selected, nothing's happening in Dorico, but all you have to do is press a note on your MIDI keyboard, and in the very, very bottom right corner of your screen, right down here, every time I press a note, you get a little tiny green light come on. It doesn't matter what you're pressing on your keyboard, you get a tiny green light, and that's just your, yes, it's working light. That's all you need to do. If it's not working, just unplug the keyboard and plug it back in again, and then do that, and you'll probably find the light turns on. If that doesn't work, then there's a bigger problem somewhere, and we can deal with that. Just let me know after the session, and we'll sort that out. But I think a MIDI keyboard is going to be a lot quicker because also things like entering that F sharp, you can do that, and you can enter chords and all sorts of things. And as we go on, you'll see various options. Now, I'm not saying, you know, obviously it's the only option. There are all sorts of different options. We're going to look at some other finale type options as well in a second. But I think that is actually quite a quick way of doing it. But that is doing the duration first, and then you're entering pitch. And if you prefer pitch before duration, then we're going to do that in this next section. Let me just check for a couple of the questions. Hang on a second. Yeah, somebody said it sounds overwhelming at first, but it is good to have different options. Yes, and that's what we're looking at. If you haven't found the option that works for you yet in this section, don't worry about it. We're continuing on to some other options in a minute.
Just to figure out whether I'm in this session and it's doing anything for me, was I supposed to open Dorico and try and make this happen?
If you want to, yes, you can. There is a file. I'll just put the link in the chat again. There is a file you can download. This Dorico file I'm working on, and unless somebody happens to have the link, hang on, let me find it. Here it is. So there is a file you can download which has the session materials, which is, there you go. I'll put it in the chat, and you can download this Dorico file, and you can also download this file which has lots of the shortcuts and things, and you can make your own notes if you want to, because it's got lots of the shortcuts already in there. But you can download those if you want to, yes, from the session materials page.
That's what I want to know.
Okay, no problem. And right. Let me just check for a couple of the other questions. I think there's a question about octaves. That's okay. There we go. Turn the caret off, press enter or escape. And somebody's asked, how do you get a dotted quarter note? You're jumping ahead. Just hold your horses a minute. Command 8 is not working on my Mac. Command is also sometimes the Apple symbol on it, and then 8. But if you can't find that one, then just press there's an arrow at the bottom of the screen here, right in the bottom in the middle. There's a section you can just click on right at the bottom, and it will open and close that bottom section. And then you can click on the keyboard icon here if you're doing that earlier section. So I'm going to move on to section 4. Yes, if you set middle C to C3 or remain set for the next time I open Dorico, that's the issue I had today. I set it in the previous session and left it, and that's then your default. I've now put it back to C4, and it will now confuse me when I start Dorico again and forget that middle C changed. Section 4. So this is the finale type option. I'm going to double click here. I'm going to turn this ghost note off because it annoys me. So to turn this ghost note off, if you don't want the ghost note and you're accidentally adding notes when you didn't mean to, then like I do, then click on this little arrow up here and it'll turn that arrow off. There you go. So now what I want to do is we're going to call this kind of the finale type option, or it's called pitch before duration. So this one, you click on a button up here, and the shortcut for this is K. If you're following along in the notes, then it says the shortcut is K for pitch before duration. This third button here will light up. So this one's turning my mouse off, this one shows me I'm doing note input, and this one is the pitch before duration. So now what happens is that if let me bring my keyboard back on here. Oh, I'll put it up here instead, out of the way. So now what happens is that when I'm in Dorico here and I choose a pitch, I can choose G first, and you see the ghost note goes to G, and then I can press 6. So if you prefer doing it that way round, some people prefer to do pitch first and then duration, then you can. Also, while we've got this rhythm grid on here, the rhythm grid is still set to 8ths. Don't worry, we'll show you options of how to change that in a bit. But the rhythm grid, if you want to move along the rhythm grid, you can also just use the arrow keys. So you can use the right and the left arrow key to move to where you want to be. So you can move along here, and then you can say, for example, I want a D, and I want it to be an 8th note. And then I want a G, and I want it to be a quarter note. And then I want to move along with this arrow key. And then I want a D, and I want an 8th note. And then I want a G as an 8th note, and I want a D as an 8th note. Now, the downside of this is that you're having to specify every time. So you're having to specify, whereas in the previous system, I only had to choose 8th note once, and then I could just enter all the pitches, either on a MIDI keyboard or on the QWERTY keyboard. With this system, you have to say B, and it's still an 8th note, and the D is a quarter note. So you have to, you have to specify that way. But some people prefer that option. So if you just press K, it toggles that option on and off. You see over here, up here, you're toggling on and off the option for whether it's pitch before duration or duration before pitch. And you can set your own preference. If you want to leave that on by default, there's also a preference in Dorico for setting that. So if that's the way you prefer to do it, then you can do that. Now, as another option that people quite liked in Finale, so if I press G, for example, there's an option to use the arrow keys to move this ghost note up and down, which some people used to like. Now, at the moment, the default is you have to hold down the Option key to move that ghost note. You can see it moving up and down. I can't hear mine, actually. It's only because it's a bit quiet on my speakers. Apologies, but it's playing to me. It's auditioning all of those notes for me. So I can move this to where I want it to be just using the arrow keys. At the moment, I'm holding down Option to do that, and it's moving that ghost note up and down when I use the arrow keys. I'll show you how to change it in a minute. Now, I can now press 6, and I can input a note there if I wanted to. So I can move on, and I can move down to A, and then I can press 5, I can move up, and I can press 6. So if you prefer doing it that way, you can also do it in Dorico. If you really, really, really want to use these arrow keys up and down instead of holding down Option, then you can, and there's a shortcut to change it. But the reason we do it this way, the reason we have Dorico working this way, is if I choose, so I've turned the caret line off, I've pressed escape, you saw me press escape up here. If I choose this note and I use Option and move this note up and down, it moves diatonically. And then if I use the arrow keys and do Option but move to the right, it will move that note along in the bar. And this is also another useful editing option. So Option by default is the move key. So Option or Alt, if you're on a PC, is your move key. And so you can move things up and down. However, if you don't want that because you want the finale option of just using the arrow keys to move notes up and down, you can do it. So that's where I said on that resources page, there is a third shortcut. And the third shortcut, the third shortcuts file is this one. And this tells you how to change your note input shortcuts. So we call it the shadow note because that's what you're moving when you're doing this. So what you'll do, and so this is the full details of what I'm about to tell you. If you want to download that, you'll go to on a Mac, you'll go to Edit. Dorico Preferences. On a PC, you go to Edit Preferences. Preferences is at the bottom down here on a PC. On a Mac, it's in Dorico Preferences. And then there is a Key Commands section. So Steinberg call them Key Commands instead of shortcuts. I never actually got a clear answer from people at Steinberg why they call them Key Commands, but they do. So they're called Key Commands. And then in here, in the search box, you can search for Shadow Note. And in the note input section, you can change the option to raise the shadow note by step. And you can add, there's also lower shadow note by step. And you can change these. You can click in the shortcut box. You can say raise shadow note by step. I want it to be the up arrow. I'm just going to press the up arrow. And it says, great, you can do that. And you can add key command. I'm not going to right now, but you can, if you want to, change that one. But you'll also need to change this other option that already has that set. So in the details sheet that I've given you, that you can download, it tells you if you're going to change that shortcut, you also might want to change this move up shortcut to the Alt or the Option up arrow option. So if you want to use that, you can. If any of this is confusing, you can email me later and we can go through this in some other time, no problem. But if you want that, then we can do it. I will give you my email address at the end, so don't worry. So there is that option to change that shortcut if you really want to. While I'm in this key command section, if you also really, really, really hate the fact that we've changed all your numbers for the note durations, you can also change those in Dorico. Or if you just want to leave the numbers at the top being as you would expect, but you want the numeric keypad on the right-hand side to be the numbers that you expect from Finale or from Sibelius, then you can also do that. You can search in here for set note duration. And in the note input section here for set note duration, you can change all of these. So here is a quarter note. We've reminded you it's called crotchet, but it's 6. And if you want to add another shortcut or replace our shortcut, you can do that if you really want to. Please don't do it on day one. There is a good reason why our shortcuts are this way, and I think it's worth trying out a little bit. But there you go. So that's how to change some of the shortcuts. It's in that sheet that you can download from the that resources page. Now, this particular next section, I'm just going to check the comments for 2 seconds, and then I'm going to do some input via a MIDI keyboard. This is the recording option via a MIDI keyboard as well. So, and then we'll move into lots of other sections. So hang on a second. Just checking the comments. There's a question about the on-screen keyboard. Just very quickly then, if you are using the on-screen keyboard, especially on an iPad, you have the on-screen keyboard here. Middle C we changed to be C4. There's a little keyboard here, and this keyboard, if you drag on it or click on it, if you're on the iPad and drag, you can move what you're actually seeing as this keyboard. So here's middle C, and you can see middle C can move around. So if you need a different octave, then you can get different octaves from there. You can also, the gray note at the end, you can drag just the gray note and add or remove more or less keys at the top and the bottom. So if you need to change the range of things that you're seeing on the on-screen keyboard, you can do that as well. Just let me check some of the other comments. Bear with me a second. Let me just check the comments. It's already to advance the caret to the next line without the mouse, it's stopping at the double bar. in this particular case, the way we've set this project up, each one of these sections, 4-bar sections, is a new flow. It's like having a new movement or a new piece in the same file. So you would need to use the mouse, just in this case, to move to one of the other sections. You'll need to move the mouse for that. Generally, you won't, because it would all be the same piece. You would just be able to keep writing the same music. But we're only doing this in little 4-bar sections. So at the moment, you'll need to use the mouse for that. Just let me check the other comments. There's a lot of people on here. I apologize. I think, unless I've missed anything, just...
Yes, I have a quick question.
Okay.
I tried to put it in the chat, but I'm not that fast. So I'm using your number keypad thing, and
Yep.
it keeps automatically highlighting the dotted quarter and then messing up all my rhythms. Why? And what am
Okay.
I hitting wrong that it's doing that? Because I put in 6 and then G or C or whatever I want, and it ties it out.
We will be doing dotted notes later, but I think what you're
No, I
doing
don't
is...
want
No,
to.
no, no. I understand. I understand. Sorry.
Yeah.
I'll explain more about dotted notes later. I think what's happening in your particular case is there's an option in Dorico. If you double tap a number accidentally, it will give you a dotted note. So if you double
Okay.
tap 6, for example, you'll get a dotted quarter.
Okay.
So
All right.
if that
So be
happens,
careful
just
touch.
press 6
Okay.
again once. So if I double tap 6, then you'll so
Okay.
if I was doing note input up here and I double tap 6, then you would get a dotted quarter. And if I just press 6 again once, it will turn that dot off. That
Got
only happens if you're not in the finale option. So if anybody's double tapping again, that's not happening. If you've got this finale option on for pitch before duration, then it won't happen to you. But in the Dorico default options, with that option off, which the shortcut was K, if you double tap, then 6 will give you a dotted. And you're spoiling all my... This is spoiler alert for later, but yes, it's a quick way of doing...
No, I didn't
No,
want it to do it, but yeah, thank you.
exactly. No, that's fine. So we'll get to that in a bit. Thank you. So I'm just going to do some live MIDI input here. So in the real-time MIDI input section here, I don't need to activate the caret this time. So if you've activated the caret line, well done, but you don't need to this time. So press escape or enter to turn that off. You only need to have this rest selected to tell Dorico which bar you're going to go from. Also, annoyingly, only in this project, because of the way we annoyingly set it up, and I apologize, in a minute, when I press record, the screen's going to jump to the previous flow, which is down here, which is not at all useful, but ignore the fact that it's happening. I'm hoping you can all memorize this little melody, which goes... And I'm not sure my keyboard's loud enough, so maybe I should turn that one up again. Anyway, but there's that little melody. So what I'm going to do is... And this might not work because it's live, and if any time I do anything live, this is never going to work. But I'm going to record live with a metronome. So when I press this record button up here, then it's going to give me a metronome, and I'm going to record it in live from the MIDI keyboard. So I have to play in time with the metronome. So, see, it jumped, and I didn't want it to. And then I can't hear my own click. So I'm going to press stop, which is the space bar, and then do that again. So I'm going to press record up here. Now I can hear it. I should have showed you the on-screen, the keyboard to preview I was doing it. So it's not perfect because I'm not. Also because I'm doing this live and there's too many other things going on, and apologies if you couldn't hear it, but believe me, I was playing live on a MIDI keyboard so that it was playing along to the metronome. When you do it on your system, you may find a couple of other things potentially happen. You may find you get a click sound that you don't like. You may find that you're not sure if you've got 1 or 2 bars in that it's going to play you before you have to come in. So the count in number of bars. So if you really like playing in with a MIDI keyboard, it is possible. Now, actually, this is not bad notation for what I actually played, although I maybe messed up slightly at the end. I'm going to show you a couple of the options because for people who really like this, these are the couple of things that are going to make things quite a lot more useful for you if you like it. If you don't, and you don't have a MIDI keyboard, just bear with me for 2 minutes while I explain this little bit. If you go to the library menu, there's an option for playback options. And if you click on playback options, it loads this dialog, and it will default to the click section, which is where we want to be. In here, you have 3 options for the click sound. You have click, which is called a Uri click. It's like a kind of static tick almost, and it's unpitched, very useful because it's unpitched and it doesn't annoy you that it's the wrong key. There is beep, which is probably the most annoying thing you can use, and I don't recommend you use it. There's also woodblock, which can be nice, but they feel slightly pitched sometimes. So sometimes they're not maybe the best option. So I use click personally, and I think that's the Dorico default now, but you can change them if you want to. You can also change other things to do with the click if you want to get picky about them, but just use click and that will be good. And underneath is the count-in, the number of bars. If you're working on particularly quick music, or if you just prefer to have 2 bars count in before, especially if your MIDI keyboard is not right in front of you, if it's there and you want 2 bars, then you can have 2 bar count in instead of 1 bar count in if you wanted it. So if you're using a MIDI keyboard, those are the options that I would suggest you check. So, and when I input this also, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail on this one, but also when I've recorded this in, and if this is the kind of thing that lots of people want to do, we'll maybe do another session on this. If I expand the lower section down here, then I had this keyboard that I was using earlier, but also in this lower section, if I click on this button here, which is the key editor, so that's this button here, then it shows me the key editor. Now, the key editor is like what we call a DAW, a digital audio workstation. It's showing me a representation of all of the notes. You may be used to these, you may not. But every time I click on a note here, it would highlight here. And if I click on a note here, then it will highlight here. So they're all linked. Now, I can choose a note here and I can make it longer, and it will change the notation if I want it to. So I can use this also to edit things and change the notation, whether that's making a note longer or shorter. I can also, because there's an option here for notated durations, it's editing the notation. If I switch to this one, you'll see the live MIDI data. So this D4 note down here was actually played very slightly too early, but Dorico's given me a clean 8th note. And this one was not only played slightly early, but I played it slightly too long, but it's also given me an 8th note. So I can edit this if I want to, just for sound purposes, or edit the recording that I did, or I can edit the notation and I can tidy things up this way. If you're not interested in this side of things, then that's fine. We're going to about to move on anyway. But if you're really interested in kind of the MIDI side of things and recording from a MIDI keyboard, this can be really useful. I'm not going to go into more detail, but there is also quantize options and re-quantize options and all sorts of things that you can potentially use, but we're not going to go into it too much in this session. So I'm going to close that panel. Just let me check for any comments in the chat. Bear with me a second. When you play that external MIDI keyboard, will the lower right light also flash light up? Yes. So if I've chosen a bar here and I'm pressing record, then every time I press a note on my MIDI keyboard, then the little green light down here in the bottom right corner will also light up to tell me that the MIDI data is being received. I haven't got this upper line of options showing library. Haven't used Dorico before. If you've gone to full screen mode on a Mac, then it might disappear. If you go right to the top of the screen, it should appear. I'm not in full screen mode. I've just kind of got a large window showing here. So you should have a library menu at the top. And I'm just going to check to see if there's any comments in the chat. Because we've reached an hour already for this call, and we will be moving on much quicker for these other sections because we'll be building on what we've already learnt. If anybody needs to take a quick break for 2 minutes to get some water or a comfort break or anything else, then you're welcome to do so, because I also need to let my dog out because she's pestering me. So you've got 2 minutes if you want it. My dog's a miniature dachshund. So if anybody else has a tiny dog who's at their leg because they need to go out, you're all welcome to do that for a minute. So I will just turn my camera off just very briefly, and we'll be back in 2 minutes.
I don't know. Why am I doing this?
Because you're unmuted.
Yeah, I have not started using anything or learning about Dorico, but I'm so ready. You know, I've been using Finale for 30 years, and I'm wondering whether taking my time doing this right now is any good. How, you know, how can I learn how to use Dorico?
like everything else, practice. And
Well,
we're all in the same boat.
yes, but I mean, how do you find out the very basics? Does it
Well,
come with
hopefully this lesson has lots of the basics, but there is also a first steps guide that we have, which has literally every single step you need to do, click on, or anything else to enter a simple piano piece and then a blues piece as well. So I'll also give you some links to that in this session.
yes,
In fact, on the page, the session materials page, underneath the session materials links, there's a link to the first steps guide, and that is you can have a PDF. There's a video follow along for that as well, and it literally talks about every single step that you would need to click on and do. And it will walk you through those as well. But yes, I would not start with kind of importing something, a large project you've got from somewhere else. Start with some simple, small projects of, like we're doing today, and start there.
but we are going to be able to download these links that you're talking about to give us help at the very beginning of using Dorico.
Yes, I've just put the session materials link in the chat again. And when you're on the page, this session materials page, so the files we're using now, if you go underneath that one, there's a first steps guide link underneath it. And that first steps guide takes you here, which is
this is going so fast. First steps guide, download PDF. Do I just press on that?
so. Are you on this page for the session materials?
Right.
Yeah. So if you scroll down here where it says further information,
Yes.
and it says first steps guide, just click on that.
You know what? I think I'm just following you. I haven't been having this on my screen.
Oh, okay. Well, you'll need to go to in the chat in Zoom.
Yes.
There's a link I've just put in there that says blog.dorico.com/session-materials.
Okay, I've got to. Should I go press home then to get there?
If you click on that link in the chat, it should open in your web browser.
If I push it home?
I'm not sure what home is.
Well, here's. I guess I just don't know what I'm doing here.
Can you see? You can see the chat and the conversation as part of the Zoom call.
Well, yes, but
so that
I'm not doing
that blue link, if you click on it with your mouse, then it should open that link in your web browser.
Okay. Download notes about note input. I'm looking at this. Just
yes. So then if you scroll down that page.
Well, but when I'm not able to scroll down the page. Well, maybe I am right now.
Can you see a section that says further information?
Yes.
Okay, so underneath further information, there's a blue link that says first steps guide.
Yes, that's what I need.
Okay, so if you click on first steps guide.
Yes.
Then there's a page that says getting started with Dorico.
Yes.
It does talk about installation. You can skip that bit. And then it says first steps guide.
Yes.
And there are 3 blue options: online web help, download PDF, and video follow along.
Yes.
So if you download that PDF, then that is a full PDF of exact instructions of what to do in Dorico to do first a piano piece, and then if you want to continue, there's an extract of a blues song for a couple of different musical styles, and it's got all of the shortcuts and everything as a completely guided lesson of all of the shortcuts and things you would need to do and click on. If you also want to follow along as you're doing it, there's a video of that as well. So it's me doing all the steps.
Download the PDF.
Yeah, download the PDF.
Okay.
And then after this session, at some point, you can.
Okay, there it is.
Okay.
And where does that come? Does it come right to my email?
No, that'll be in your downloads folder now on your computer.
In my downloads. Okay.
Yep.
Because other than this, I think I need to just do that. And
yeah, no, that's great. Yeah. I mean, I'd certainly recommend that's a very useful option to do.
Yes, to start there. And I've watched already a whole bunch of YouTubes, and I'm ready to do this.
Yes.
But
I mean, it's I think watching the YouTube videos is great, but it really does come down to actually doing it and,
course.
and working your way through the steps, and quite possibly working your way through the steps more than once to get them. Just bear with me 2 seconds. I'm going to let my dog back in. She's probably quite wet
Yes.
now. Hang on a
And
second.
I'm going to just get out of this. I think it's not going to do me any good. Okay, let's see my
Miss
down.
Kate, before you
Yes.
go, I just
Yeah.
want to read the comment I made because I'm not sure you're going to see it in the chat. I'm
Yeah.
Shelby. As a finale refugee, I can say it helps a lot to let go of the idea of translating every single function and instead embrace a new way of looking at the music entry. I also find with these live webinars and quick flowing videos, sometimes it helps to not try to click along and keep up, but just to watch the flow, get through the whole thing, and then play it back and click everything. So you're not trying to do everything at once and hear everything at once. And you're able, instead of patting the tummy and rubbing the belly and patting your head, and everything
Yes.
all at once, it's just so overwhelming. It
Yes.
may help to just watch the thing and then and download everything and then go back and follow it through at your own pace. It'll sound so much more familiar the second time through, and you'll be able to go slowly.
Yep. Yeah, no problem. I mean, I'm sorry. I don't know if anybody else has a really wet dog now.
Oh,
Never mind. Anyway, I'll carry on. So,
I will
so
take your advice and stay on.
yeah. So stay on because you'll kind of you'll watch how we're doing it. You'll hear some of the questions that other people have, and then
Yes.
because we're recording this anyway, you
Yes.
can go back through either this lesson as many times as you like. You can also do the first steps guide or anything else, and yes, it's going to be, it's not going to be instantly working straight away, and so yes, I
Well, neither
understand.
was finale. It took me a long time of staying up.
Exactly, and I'm hoping this will take you less time. But you probably also did that over quite a period of time, as I did with
I
the software I've used before.
did.
Right. So let me just check. There's anything? Have I missed anything? Somebody in the on YouTube as well also said they were having problem with dotted notes. So if you accidentally double tapped a number, that's how you get dotted notes. We will move on to dotted notes in a minute, so don't worry if that happened to you. We'll carry on for that as well. The Dorico is there a Dorico for Dummies book in print? There is a Learning Dorico book, but it is version 4.3, so it doesn't have all of the current options and shortcuts in it. So I'd say our first steps guide is probably your Dorico for Dummies book in print or this session. And if I will certainly take on board any comments and other things or other sessions that we can also do for this one. Let me just check. I don't think I've missed any comments. So if I have, maybe ask the question again in the chat. Why is my search bar in the preferences not showing results after writing in something? It just goes away. That was this one here. I don't use this one in the top left corner. That's searching categories. It should be this search in the key commands bit. And then when you type things, if you type shadow, for example, the only reason things would go away is if it can't find it. So then it would go away. So if I mistyped the word shadow, then everything would go away. Maybe, but I can't think of any other reason. Any tips for connecting my MIDI keyboard? Maybe we should chat about that one later, because that's particular probably to your system, but it normally isn't too difficult. Normally just plug a USB keyboard in and it will work. And somebody's asking about plus and minus. Yes, we will get onto those. In fact, we're going to get into accidentals in just a second, Thomas. So that's very useful. I don't think I missed any questions. So let's carry on for a minute and let's go from there. So moving or correcting pitches in 3.6. There's a few ways you can do this. To start off with, you can move your mouse and use your mouse. So if you click on a note here, you can drag a note up and down. It's the slowest, most inaccurate way of doing things, but if you prefer doing it that way, you can do it that way and just use your mouse and drag things if you want to. Other ways you can do it, and other ways I would suggest, if you choose a note, the default move key, I call it the move key, is Alt or Option on your keyboard. So on your computer keyboard, you have a key. If you're on Windows, it says Alt. If you're on a Mac, it says Option. If you hold down that and press the up arrow, it will move diatonically up to get where you want it to get to. However, you've got to move a long way. So let's press the arrow key to the right, and that will select the next note. And now hold down the Option or Alt key, but also on Windows, hold down Control and Alt, Control meaning big, and on a Mac, hold down Command and Option, and then you can move in octaves, which is much easier because it's much quicker to be able to move in octaves. If you're not sure what those shortcuts were that I just said, it's on the shortcut sheet that the Word file. So Control Alt or Command Option will do octaves. Just Alt is your move key. You can move diatonically. If you want to move chromatically, you can use Shift and Alt, so you can move chromatically as well. And on your system, I've turned my speakers down, but on your system, you'll hear it as you do all of that. You'll hear it move chromatically. So you can use those. Now you can also, if I just use the arrows to the right here, and I'm going to hold down Shift so I can select more notes like this. You can also, with your mouse, you can choose the first note and you can shift click on the last one like this. And then if you use your same shortcut, so I'm going to use on my system Command Option, but if you're on a PC, Control Alt, and I can move all of the notes up an octave. So that's a good way of moving them all. Now these ones here are annoyingly not the right pitches, so I'm just going to hold down Option and I'm going to move them up and a tiny bit up and up a bit further to get to where I want to be. So you can move and you can correct the pitches and things that you need on there. So I'm going to just finish this one off, do that one and that one and that one and that one like that. So you can move and correct pitches. I would say that using a keyboard it might feel like more key presses, but is generally a relatively accurate way of doing it because you're only moving by step. If you're using it with a mouse and you're dragging things, it's easy to go too far and spend a long time trying to get to the right place, but you can use the option that suits you the most. Now, accidentals and enharmonic reinterpretation. If you have a MIDI keyboard, there is another option for this, and it comes up in a later section, I think. Bear with me a second. Yes, it comes up in a later section. So if you're thinking, can I use my MIDI keyboard to change all of these pitches to make them correct? Yes, it comes up in a later section. So we're going to move on to accidentals and enharmonic reinterpretation. If I double click here and I want to enter a C sharp, I'm going to use my MIDI keyboard because initially entering accidentals is quicker. Actually, all right, I won't start off with because somebody asked about the shortcuts. So I'm just going to say, here is a quarter note, fantastic. And on my computer keyboard, I'm going to press C. It's in the wrong octave, so I'm going to press Option Command down to get to the right place. Now, it's still wrong because it says C. So there is a button over here that says sharp. And if I choose that, nothing happens, which is very annoying, isn't it? I'll explain why. All the people who are finale users, you probably think of it as pressing the letter C and then sharp, as in C sharp. And I completely get it. And I don't actually know why the Dorico default is to call it sharp C rather than C sharp. And I'll explain why. If I just press backspace and delete that note, if I click on this note, this option here, this sharp, and then if I press C on my keyboard, I get a C sharp. So I've chosen the sharp first and then I've pressed C and I've got a C sharp. So if I wanted now a D sharp, I can press this sharp key and I can press D and I'll get D sharp. On my computer keyboard here, I've got these buttons 0, minus, plus. So once we've got to the end of all of our notes, in fact, if I show you on this one here, once you've got to the end of all of your numbers here, then you've got 0, minus, and it says equals, but there is actually a plus on it, like on that key. So you've got natural, flat, sharp on those keys there. So you can use those keys as shortcuts for them. So let's just move that out of the way. So what we can now do is I can say, let me move that down a bit. I can now say, I can press that key there, and then I can say F. And then I can press that key there, and I can press G. So I can do it that way. Now, if you are doing this in kind of finale mode, so in pitch before duration, then you will want to say D flat. which you can, because you can say D flat, and then you can say it's a quarter note. So if you prefer to do it that way, and you prefer working in this finale mode, this button here, the shortcut was K, then you can say E, you can say flat, and you can say quarter note. There is also an option in Dorico in the preferences, so for whether you specify the sharp or the pitch first. So if you really want it, then there is an option in the preferences to say when you're inputting notes, specify accidentals, also rhythm dots and articulations, before inputting the note or after inputting note. So if I say after inputting note, if you prefer this option, and I can completely understand why some people would, then I don't need that option on. This is the Dorico default mode, not pitch before duration. I can now say, oh, you can't see what I'm doing. I can now say G, and then I can say flat. So we can say 6, and we can say G, and we can say flat, and we can do it that way if you really want to with note input. Mine's just stopped working. That's fantastic. There we go. So I can now say A, and then I can say flat. So if you prefer to think of it as an A flat, and I do, then choose that option in the preferences. So it's Dorico preferences on a PC. It's in the edit menu and preferences. And then you'll find this before inputting note for accidentals or after. This is the default just because of the way our note input works, but you can specify it the other way if you wish. Now, if you're using a MIDI keyboard, this can get a bit annoying because I'm just going to delete these notes. If I was to use a MIDI keyboard and I was to say I wanted to press a C sharp, then I got a D flat. And if I press a D sharp, then I get an E flat, and that's a bit annoying. Now that happens because at the moment we haven't specified a key signature. If we had specified a key signature, Dorico would know more about what it was doing. So if we don't need to go into key signatures right now, but just for example, if we were, for example, in C sharp, when I press C sharp on my MIDI keyboard, it will enter a C sharp because it knows the key signature. But there wasn't a key signature, so Dorico had tended to decide that maybe D flat was better than C sharp for whatever reason. So when you want to change things enharmonically, so we've got here all of the correct notes, but they are enharmonically wrong, and we want to change them. So this note here, if you remember, Alt or Option is our move key. I can hold down Alt or Option on my keyboard here, and I can use these same plus and minus buttons, and I can move these notes. So, oh, I need to get the focus back on Dorico. There we go. So I can move these, and I can move to the right, and I can say go that way, and I can say this, and I can say go that way. So I can enharmonically change things. Now, if you press this key twice, then you'll get things like 3 flats or triple flats, and you'll get double sharps because it's more than one enharmonic. So it depends how many times you press the key as to which ones you're going to get. So for example, this one here needs to go up to D, but if you go too far, it's an E double flat, and you can come back again. And so I'm holding down my Option or move key, and I'm enharmonically changing these notes. There we go. Now, we're going to use a MIDI keyboard for doing some of that later as well, but now you have the shortcuts for those if you need them, and the details of that are in the shortcuts sheet. Now, is there a tool to select all the notes in the first measure and rename as flats? Yes, but that's probably a bit more than we want to look at right now, but yes, there is one. There's also tools to do things like respell this entire scale in a minor, or a figurian, or a whatever. There's all of those kind of options. There's things like respell all my F sharps as G flats in the entire piece. Yes, there are options to do that, but I thought we'll just look at the basic kind of options for these at the moment. Somebody's also said I use a Stream Deck with Dorico, which makes input much easier than a computer keyboard. Well, I know what you mean, but the problem is the Stream Deck only has maybe 15 buttons on it. And they're often not the 15 buttons I want, and then you have multiple pages of buttons and you're having to press more buttons to get them. And on a computer keyboard, you already have 104 or whatever it is buttons that you could use. So I don't know, maybe a computer keyboard, is sometimes the shortcuts, but it depends. I understand because the Stream Deck has a lit up button with the right icon on it, so I can understand that. Let's have a look. So like I said, when you're using a computer keyboard, you will probably find actually that sorry, when you're using a MIDI keyboard, then you'll probably find that being in the right key will also help, because you're more likely to get the correct accidentals. Dotted notes. So for this dotted rhythm here, I'm going to start off making this really simple. I'm going to go into this bar here, double click here. I'm going to choose the standard Dorico method, because this is going to be the quickest. So I do not have this K option on here. So I've got the caret line. I'm just going to press 5.
Maybe he'd
And I'm
like to
just going to
keep them.
press the letter, the options here. Sorry, let me go back to Dorico. I'm going to press 5, and I'm just going to say C, D, E, F, G, and I know they're not dotted, but we will get them dotted. So I'm going to enter all of these eighth notes to start off with.
Come in.
Sorry, there's a question?
What's an unmuted user?
Oh, okay, no problem. Then let's I think we're good. So I've entered all of these eighth notes. Now I've turned the caret line off. So if you've got the caret line still on at the end over here, press escape or enter, turn the caret line off. Select this bar. You can do it by just selecting in the middle between any notes. You don't have to select the notes. Select between the notes. And then I'm going to hold down shift and select this bar to extend the selection. So I've got all of these selected. Now on my computer keyboard, I'm going to press this button here, which I would call full stop. I believe you would probably call period. But I tend to call it full stop. And if you press that key when they're all selected, then you get dotted notes. What Dorico is actually doing is it changes the first one and makes it dotted. And because the second one has already been shortened, it doesn't also dot it. So it moves on to the next one. So effectively, it only does every other note. And so you get a dotted rhythm. So it's a really quick way of doing it. So all I was doing, if I just press undo, I've entered these eighth notes, and then I've selected them all, and I've pressed dot. So if you've got a run of the same dotted rhythm, that's a really quick way of doing it. If you've got this kind of thing, you can also do it here, but I'll show you how you would do it and enter dotted notes. And this is what some people were running into before. You can, when you choose this, of course, this duration here is 6 by default, is this button here. But the shortcut for it is 6. Now, if you double tap 6, so if I press 66, then this button over here also lights up. Just for ease, it adds the dotted notes for you. So I press 66, I've got a dotted note. So now if I press C, I get a dotted note. Now, do not worry that this is initially tied. Does not matter. Just keep entering notes and all will be well. There are different rules in notation about whether you enter this rhythm and it's followed by rest or whether it's followed by notes. So you're going to keep on entering notes, just carry on. So I'm going to press 5 and I'm going to press C. And then I'm going to press 66 and I'm going to press E. And then I'm going to press 5 and I'm going to press E. And you could use a MIDI keyboard if you wanted to as well. I normally would. I'm going to press 66, G, 5, G. I'm going to press 66, C, and I'm going to press 5, C. So that's how you can also do dotted rhythms. Now, just so to show you, I'm going to delete those notes for a second. If you wanted to do other rhythms, then if you press 55, then you would get the dotted rhythm that we had over here. So you could do 55, 4, 55, 4, and do it that way if you wanted to. You can do it backwards, of course. So you can say 4 and 55 and do it that way. So for the person who asked about the Scotch snap, I know what you mean. Not everybody does, apparently, but I know what you mean. And you can do 5, and then you can do 66. And you can do that too. So it doesn't matter. Now, this is, of course, this is a dotted note. It just depends where it sits on the bar. So I will carry on. So 55, 66, it will just give you dotted notes. If you accidentally press 66 and the dot lights up and you didn't mean it, doesn't matter. Just press 6 again and you'll get standard quarter notes. If you press 55 and you didn't mean to, just press 5 again and that's fine. So effectively you press 555, which is apparently all American phone numbers. That's true, isn't it? All American phone numbers start 555? They do in films, because otherwise we'd all be phoning you up to ask you something from a film. So if you press 666, it does not invoke any kind of small, hairy, wet dog devil who's just come in from my garden. Well, actually, in this case, maybe it does. It just gives you standard notes because it doesn't do anything. So 66 will give you a dotted note. 6 would just give you the standard notes. So It's a very quick way of doing it. Now, you can if you really want to, and if you are using the finale method of doing pitch before duration, so let me just go back. The problem you have is you can't use the double option. So if you want to do this in the pitch before duration option, and you want to say, I want a C, and then I want it to be a quarter note dotted, then you'll have to do it by specifying the rhythm dot as the period key, and you will probably prefer to have your preferences set to say, after inputting note. So that was edit preferences on a PC and just in the Dorico preferences menu on a Mac. So on here, otherwise you have to say I want a C, I want a dot, and I want a quarter note, and then I want a C, and I want an eighth note, and then I want an E, and I want a dot, and I want a quarter note. So you'd have to do it that way. It's not my preferred method, so change the preferences. But it depends how you prefer working. But there is a method for all of them, all the way around. You could potentially want to do it, and some of them, like this one, are particularly quick. So that's some dotted notes. You can also make a note dotted later or undotted. If I choose a note that is dotted and I press period, then it will take the dot off. If I choose this note and press period, then it will take the dot off. If I press it again, it'll put the dot back on again. If I move over here and press it again, it'll put the dot back on again. So you sometimes do want to use the period key, but in some cases you can just press 6 or you can press 66 and it will make it dotted or not, depending on what's going on. Moving on to the next section, which is triplets. Triplets. We'll also be doing mixed triplets and we'll be doing tuplets. So in triplets, I'm going to double click over here. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to press the triplet button. There is a triplet button here, which by default says 3, 2, as in a ratio. But the shortcut for it, and it's in the shortcuts guide that I've given you to download, is semicolon. So I'm going to press semicolon, and I get this little box, and this little box is called a popover. We also use them for dynamics and all sorts of things. And by default, it handily has 3 in it, so I don't even have to enter 3. And just say triplets and press enter. So now I can get triplets. The problem is I had selected over here quarter note, which is not what I wanted. So sorry, I'm just going to press undo. So to start off with, you say I want triplets, but I want eighth note triplets. So you say eighth note. You say you want a triplet, and then you can enter the triplets. So I'm going to use my MIDI keyboard because it's going to make it quicker. So I'm just going to go, oh, I can't see what I'm doing. Apologies. Let me move that out of the way. Move that. There we go. So now I can say do, and now I can. They stay on. They're sticky. So I can just keep going. Now I want to turn the triplets off, and the off button is the same semicolon, but you use with shift. So it's shift and colon. And it turns the triplets off. Why do you have to have a different one? Because you might have a nested triplet. You might have started a triplet and want something else nested inside it. So we have an on and an off key for triplets. So now I can just say 6 and I can press the last note. Oh, I didn't turn them off. Apologies. My mistake. Sorry, it's because I clicked on this camera thing down here. Apologies, that was my mistake. So let me just go back. I say 6 and I went C. There we go. Oh, I'm still doing it. Now I've got it. Turn the triplets off. Yeah, sorry, that's just my focus because I'm doing this live with this camera thing down here as well, so you can see my hands. Sorry, that was my mistake. So now I want to enter these notes here. So again, I'm going to press 6 to make sure I'm on a quarter note. I'm going to press the triplet button. I'm going to press enter, and then I'm just going to enter those notes. Oh, fat fingers. See, I said I wasn't as very good with my left hand, especially live. Oh, and I've entered the wrong notes. Never mind, doesn't matter. We get the idea. I'm going to turn the triplets off. I'm going to press 7 and press C. There we go. So triplets, they're sticky. They stay on by default. So what happens when you want to do mixed triplets? So I'm going to start down here, double click. Now, these are still 8th note triplets. So I'm going to say 8th note. You can click on it over here. I'm going to say triplets. And now I'm going to say the first one is a quarter note. So I'm going to say quarter note C, and I'm going to say 8th note C. They're still sticky. They still stay on. I'm still on 8th notes, so I could just press C, and then I can press quarter note C. So now I can carry on. Quarter note, 8th note, 8th note, quarter note. So with those ones, they're sticky, they stay on. Now the next ones, of course, these are not eighth note triplets, they are quarter note triplets. So I need to turn the triplets off. I then need to select quarter note, and I need to turn the triplets on. Enter. And now I can say I want a half note G, a quarter note G, a quarter note C, and a half note C. So you can, and then I'll turn the triplets off. And you know if they're turning the triplets on and off, because over here your triplet button will light up. So that's triplets using the semicolon key. Now we're going to use some other tuplets. Don, I'm sure we can help you with the sound issues after this session. It's normally an edit device setup, but I'm sure we can help you with that after the session. You should be able to enter the notes without necessarily hearing them in this one. Is there a Spanish keyboard and a Surface PC? I can't use a popover semicolon. Is there another key? Yeah, I think it's semicolon by default, but you can change it in the preferences if you want to change that to a different shortcut. But if you want to email me, I'll give you my email address at the end of the session, and we can sort out if there's a key that you can't find or anything else, or we need to map it some other way. Rick Peckham, yes, I know 555 is generic placeholder for movie use. I think it's because nobody has 555 in the US. I record with the keyboard. How do I quantize the notes if they are not in time? When you if you're using the live MIDI keyboard option and you're doing triplets, let me just move that one out of the way. Then when you do in the play section for the preferences, you can specify whether or not you want to detect tuplets or not. So if you're doing tuplets from a live MIDI keyboard, then you can do that. There's also a quantize option for tuplets as well. What about complex triplets with mixed note values? Well, these ones have mixed note values. These ones are slightly more complex, so let's move on with these ones for a second. So I'm going to double click here in section 11, and for these tuplets, what we're going to do, these are eighth note, but there's 5 of them in the time where there would normally have been 4. So what we're going to do this time is we're going to say I want an eighth note, but when I choose the triplet button, so I'm going to put this back on again. Here we go. When I choose the triplet button here, it pops up. Oh, it's my focus again. Sorry, apologies. There we go. It pops up and says 3, but I don't want triplets. So this time what I want to say is 5 in the time of 4. So you enter a ratio. So I've said 5 colon 4, and then I'm going to press enter. And so now I get 5. And so now I can say I've got C, B, A, G, F. Now for the next one, I want 7. So I need to end that tuplet. And I need to say this time I still want eighth notes, but there are 7 of them in the time where normally 4 would have fitted. So I'm going to say tuplets, but I'm going to say 7 in the time of 4. And so now I can enter these other notes like that. And then I'm going to press stop, because this time I want 16th notes. So I choose 16th notes, and then I choose tuplets, and I say I want 7 in the time of 4. Is that right? Yes. And my brain's starting to go now. It's I won't tell you what time of day it is. There we go. And if you wanted 6, then you stop those tuplets, you start new tuplets, and you say 6 in the time of 4. And you can enter these ones. Oops, wrong octave. Never mind. Let's carry on. There we go. So you get the idea. So all you're doing is entering a ratio. Stop the tuplet. You're entering a ratio of what you want. Now, you can, if you really want to, since somebody has, asked about, very complex ones. If you start a tuplet, so let's say you started triplets, and then you wanted to start another one, then you could enter, nested tuplets of things, and you'll get all sorts of complicated mess things, and you can start other tuplets inside those. And you can do all sorts of things. I wouldn't, but you can. If you want to be entering Fernio or any other type of music, you can enter all sorts of nested tuplets and options and all sorts of things. But I think that's probably a bit more than we want to do today. So basically, it's a ratio. So wherever the caret line is here, you choose the note value. So you want 16th notes, and then you choose the triplet button, and you enter 5 in the time of however many there normally would be in that space. and then you can enter those notes. Where was I? Up here. Oh, fat fingers again. There we go. And then stop those and start the next tuplet. So hopefully that's okay. Let's move on. Rests and the rhythm grid. Somebody asked about entering rests earlier, and generally we don't need to. So what I'm going to do is when I double click down here, we've got the rhythm grid. Now this was also, there was a question earlier about these are only eighth notes. So what do we do if it's more than eighth notes? And that's what we're going to do now. So rests and the rhythm grid. What we're going to do is you can move along the rhythm grid just using the arrow keys. You can also move along the rhythm grid if you choose a note value. So for example, if I choose half note and then use the space bar, it will move along by that value. It will move along by a half note. I can still use the arrow keys as well if I wanted to, so I can still use the arrow keys to move backwards and forwards. But sometimes you doing this and entering a value and using the space bar is going to be quicker or more accurate for what you want to do. In this particular case, I could just move anyway to here, press 6, and I can enter a C. I don't need to, oh, wrong octave. Don't need to say enter any of the rests. If I press the space bar now, because quarter note is already lit up over here, press quarter note. So I press the space bar, it'll move on, and I can press C again. So now if I want to enter this one, I can say 5 for eighth note, press the space bar, and I can just say E space G space G. Now, for this next one, the rhythm grid is on eighths, but I need a 16th rest. So what I can do is I can say 16th, so which is button 4 here, and I can use the space bar, and it will move on by a 16th, even though the rhythm grid isn't showing me 16ths at the moment. And so now if I say 55 and C, then I'll get exactly what I want, and it was entered 1/16th into the bar. If you prefer, in the very, very bottom left corner, I hope you can see in the very bottom left corner of my screen, there's a tiny little eighth note in the very bottom left corner. If not, you'll see it on your screen. And when you click on that, it lets you choose some options here, which includes, this is changing the rhythm grid, so I can change it to 16ths. So now when I start the rhythm grid, now I've got 16ths. So if you prefer to work this way, you can now use the arrow keys and you can move along by 16ths. So I know that's a strong beat. So if I move on 1, then I can move along with the arrow keys that way, and then I can say 55 C. So if you prefer to work that way, you can enter these notes this way. So you're on 16th and you can just say C, arrow key, G, arrow key, E, and C. So if you prefer to work that way and you're working on a piece that has lots of 16ths, change your rhythm grid to 16ths down here in the bottom corner, or you can leave it on eighth notes. But you can use the space bar to move along by values that the rhythm grid isn't necessarily showing you as well. So you have two options there for how you want to move those, move along. No problem if you have to go to another meeting. As I said, this is all being recorded, so you can carry on with it at any time and refresh. And I expect you all to have done this session 3 times by the end of tomorrow. Grace notes. So for grace notes, I've double clicked over here to get the caret line. I want some grace notes, and these are going to be 16th notes. So I'm going to choose 16th note. I don't know if you're now reaching with your mouse over here or if you're pressing button 4. I don't know which one you've learnt, but you can use either. Now, the button you want for grace notes is in the bottom right-hand corner down here. We have a slash. Because it looks like a grace note slash, it made sense. So if you press the slash button, hopefully on your keyboard it's just here. If you have a slightly different layout of keyboard, hopefully you can find a slash key. But that slash, when you press the slash key, you will see lit up in Dorico over here on the left-hand side, a little slash. It's underneath the tuplets button. It's almost like we're doing this in order. So here is the grace note button over here. And when you press, and if you press it again, it turns them off. So that toggles them on and off. You'll notice also the caret gets slightly smaller in a way that you can't actually discern, but sort of tells you that it's getting smaller and it's going to enter a grace note. So now if it's on and the light is on, I can now enter a grace note. So I can say D. I'm in the wrong octave, so I'll move that up an octave. I should have used my MIDI keyboard. I didn't. So now I've moved that to where I want it to be. Now I can turn the grace notes off, and I can say I want to enter C. What we're doing, B, C, D. Now I'm just going to move this out of the way. Move this. Can I move it up? So balancing everything on the screen. There we go. So now I want to enter 2 grace notes. So I will press my grace note button and I will press E and, oh, sorry, to focus again. E, oh, I didn't turn grace notes, and I will say E and D. And now I'll turn grace notes off. And now I can enter the rest. C, B, C, D. Now I can go, I do want grace notes on, but I want them to be 8th notes. So I'll say I want an 8th note grace note. And now I can say D. I can turn the grace notes off. If this seems slow, it's because I'm doing it with one hand to make it clearer what I'm pressing. Normally, I would do this with 2 hands so that it's actually really quick to toggle the grace notes on and off with one hand, or you can use your MIDI keyboard, whichever way around you prefer doing. That's what this session's all about, to tell you a whole different way of doing things or show you a number of different ways. That's what it's all about. I know that's the hokey cokey. 16th notes, grace note, C, C, C. It's really hard to do when I'm talking at the same time. Triplets. We've got a triplet in here as well. Marcus is very sneaky when he set this up. So now I'm going to turn on triplets as well, and I'm going to enter those 3 Cs. Now, you'll notice when I did the grace notes, they're not actually triplets, are they? So I didn't have to tell them that they were triplets. I just entered 3 grace notes. But that's all fine. So now I can turn my tuplets off. I can turn my caret line off with escape, and I've entered that line. So grace notes. If you also need it, you have grace notes, which are, oops, I entered another one there. Well, you have grace notes. So when you're entering grace notes, you have that little button to light up here. If you need grace notes, but you need them without the slash, then you can press Option or Alt grace note, and it will, if you see over here, it's toggling the slash on and off on that button. So if you need grace notes that don't have the slash, it's the same slash key, but you can use Alt to turn those on and off. If you're a mouse favorite person, you can right click on this and you can choose the options. So you can choose between having the slash on or not, just by right clicking on that button as well, if you want to. So that's grace notes. Now I'm going to just go to the next section. Poggiaturas. Yes, so I think we just did those ones. Chord input without a MIDI keyboard. A MIDI keyboard is quicker, but I will show you, you can do chord input without a MIDI keyboard as well. So if you don't have one, let's say you're on a train, I need to enter some chords, I don't have my MIDI keyboard, there just wasn't enough space, the other passengers weren't happy, especially since it was an 88 key weighted thing you were bringing with you. There's no space. So what you want to do to enter chords is you've got the caret line on here. You want to press Q for chords, because we've run out of shortcuts now, so go with it. And you see over here on the left-hand side, the chords light has lit up. So it says chords, and it's got these this lit up here. So you can click on that button, and Q will toggle that button on and off. And you can see also a little plus here to tell you that you're entering chords. So now if I press C, I'm on chord notes already. If I press C, I'll move it down. Now I can press E, and you see the caret line is not moving on. So I can keep pressing notes, C, E, G, and I can build up that chord. And now I can use the arrow keys to move on along the rhythm grid. And then I can say C, F, A, and I can say B, D, G. And so I can enter chords this way. And you can however many times you press the keys, it's key to keep building up chords. So there's a bigger one and a C, E, G, C. It's going to keep going up because you got to G and it goes to the next closest C, which of course is the top of the octave, which is very useful. So the same here. If I go C, F, A, C, then the same C key, it then gives me the top option at the top of the octave. And if I do this one and do C, oh, that was fat fingers, wasn't it? If I do C, E, G, C, E, G, C, then it will keep going. So you'll keep building up large octaves. So the caret does not move on automatically. You have to use the arrow keys to move it to where you want to be. But then you can do that, and you can use the pitches on your keyboard here. You can also do it if you want to using the finale option with the ghost note as well, and chord mode, and build up chords that way if you want to. But well, you get the idea. So Q is chord mode when you need it. Now the next one here is manual beaming. So this is not correct beaming in this meter. Normally when you enter these notes, so I'm just going to enter these notes quickly and show you. I'm going to say I want 8th notes, and I'm going to say C, G, G, C, G, G, C, G. And then I'm going to say I want 16th notes, and I want C, 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 C. I'm just going to press the space bar twice and press C, 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 space bar twice because I'm on 16th notes, and press C, 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 C. There we go. So now this is the standard beaming. Let's say you want to change it for some unknown reason. It doesn't matter why. We're not going into why or whether you should do this or not, but there are reasons why you would want to do this. You can select one or more notes. I'm going to select this note and I'm going to shift select this note. So I'm holding down shift and I'm selecting all of these, and I'm going to right click and I'm going to go to beaming. So this is right click with your mouse, go to beaming and go to beam together. And because I've chosen beam together, it'll beam those three together, which means it has to unbeam them from the other bits. There are various other beaming options in there. So I'm going to use the same option here. I'm going to select all of these. I'm going to right click and go to beaming. And there is beam together. There is split beam, which you might want sometimes. That's a split beam option. There is also make unbeamed, there's split secondary beam, partial beam direction, fans, stemlets, reset beaming. So if it has all gone wrong, reset beaming will take you back to the where you should be. And if you need to, you can use the beaming beam together option to beam them together if you need specific beaming options. Normally, you don't need them because, like I said, you'll find that Dorico will write it correctly based on the meter that you're in. But sometimes you need to do it. Yeah, and somebody said useful for world music for rhythmic emphasis. There are other ways of setting beaming if you're doing it in a larger scale. If you need, for example, to set 9/8 and you need to set particular groupings, you can do that based on the meter you're entering them in. I'm not going to go into that right now, but you can. So if you're thinking, my goodness, I need to write Bernstein's America again, and I need to do ba 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 ba, and every other bar needs the beaming changed. Don't do it this way with the manual beaming. There is a specific option for the meters to do that for you, and Dorico will automatically do all of that for you. This is where you need one bar or a very individual case of manual beaming. I'm not 100% sure why Marcus has put it in this lesson, but I decided you were going to need it, so we've left it in there. Polyphonic notation, voices or layers. If you're using Sibelius, they're called voices. We also call them voices in Dorico. And if you're using Finale, you probably called them layers previously. It's more than one rhythm on the same staff. So I'm going to double click here. And I'm going to enter the notes at the top. So we've got our standard up stem voice here. That's what this little quarter note down here is showing us. So I'm just going to say, I'm going to enter these notes. You could, you can use the top one as well if you want to, but I'm going to enter those notes. I'm going to enter these notes, and you'll see by default, I'm not necessarily getting the same stem directions that I've got in this top example here, but that doesn't matter. So we've got this. Now, the first bar is not the same stem direction, and this bar is, but that's based more on where these notes are on the staff themselves. Now I'm going to go back to the beginning, and I'm going to double click again here. Now, the first time, and only the first time, you need a new voice, you press Shift V for voices. So I'm going to hold down the Shift key and press V for voices, and it says plus downstem. I'm adding a new voice. In Dorico, the difference really is that the other voices don't exist until you initially add them. In Sibelius, you had 4 voices by default, and you always had 4 voices, and you just kind of moved into that voice. In Dorico, there's an unlimited number of voices, but you have to create them as and when you need them. But only press Shift V when you want to create them, because otherwise you'll end up with tons and tons of them. I'm going to press there. I'm going to enter. Now, when I enter the notes, look, the stems flip automatically. Don't worry that that isn't dotted, because as soon as I enter the next note, it is. So there we go. So there we go. And then I want to enter these, and I want to put these notes in, and I want this. And what did he write? He wrote, and then we had to keep out of the way. So we've kept it all the way down here, and we're going to do finish with that one. So now, if I needed to use this voice again, now when I've got the caret line on here, I can just press the letter V and I can toggle between the 2 available voices. I do not need to press Shift V anymore to get the voices. Just press V to toggle between the available voices for this instrument. If you want to see these as nice pretty colors, you can go to the View menu, go to Note and Rest colors, and go to Voice colors. And it will show you the 2 voices in nice pretty colors. So if you have accidentally got them the wrong way around or done this kind of thing, you can see which voice is which one. And I will show you how to do those kind of things in a minute, because I think It's one of the later sections in a minute, so that's okay. So if you want the voice colors on in the view menu, you can do note and rest colors, voice colors. There's a question, can you have 4 distinct voices across 2 staves in a system? You can have as many voices as you want. There is an unlimited number of voices in Dorico. I have been sent pieces of music where people have pressed Shift V far too often, and there are so many voices, we've got into colors you didn't even know existed for these note colors. Don't do that. Dorico copes very well with it, actually, but don't do that. Each of the 4 does have its own color. You can even, if you really, really want to, you can specify what the colors are, not for the gradients, for the voice colors. Look, here's 8 voices and the different colors, and you can reset these and play with these colors to your heart's content. Don't, but you can. So yes, you can have multiple voices. They can all have individual colors. You can make your notes look very pretty, and if you really, really want to, you can print them. Again, don't, but you could print those colors as well if you really, really wanted to. So that's the voice colors that you can turn on in note and rest colors, voice colors. I'm going to put it back to notes out of range, or actually none. Notes out of range is useful, but we don't need them today, so I'm going to say none. Moving on, copy and move. This is really quick. So when you're copying and moving things, and Chloe G, I will get to your how do you add a tie to note in a minute, because we'll need that in a second anyway. Copy and move. When I choose these notes here, and I'm just literally clicking between all of these notes in the bar, if you just press the letter R, it will repeat them exactly. So you will repeat whatever you have selected straight away after those notes. If I just press undo, if I select one note and press R, it will repeat one note. If I choose 2 notes and press R, it will repeat those 2 notes. So I had an 8th note and a quarter note, so it gives me 8th note, quarter note. If I have a 16th, an 8th, and a quarter note, and I press R, it will give me a 16th, an 8th, and a quarter, and rewrite everything according to however it should fit in that bar. But it's exactly what I've selected, and it has copied it. So pressing R is just a really good repeat key. So that's one of the options you can use to repeat things. You can also select a bar or anything else, and you can copy it by holding down the Alt or the Option key. So on your computer keyboard, your Alt or Option key, which I did say was a move key earlier, Option for me on a Mac, Alt on a PC. If I hold that key down, when I click with the mouse over here, it will copy those notes. So it's like copy and paste. You can also use Control C, and you can go somewhere else and you can say Control V. But that's a lot more key presses than just selecting some notes, holding down Alt and clicking. The downside is if you select these notes and you click in the middle of the bar, it will put them exactly where you clicked, so you'll get them somewhere else. So that might not be what you wanted. So the other options you have is that you can use in the edit menu in paste special, there is a move to staff below and a move to staff above option here, which is Alt N and M. So if I choose these here and I say Alt M, it will move them to the staff below. Instead of copying them, you're moving them. And if you really like these kind of move above and below options, I've added some shortcuts to duplicate to staff above and below. These are not default shortcuts. They exist in the keyboard preferences. So you can, in the key commands, you can add those if you want them. So you can then do things like this really quick. Oh, sorry, not that one, this one. So you can move things to staff above or below should you want them. Sorry, I accidentally turned on multi-rests. So there's multiple ways of copying things. You can Control C, Control V, you can hold down Alt and you can copy, and that can be into other instruments, into other bars, just by holding down Alt and clicking with your mouse. You can do the same just with small sections of music as well, either with R, or you can, if I go underneath this note here and paste, so I'm just using the Alt click option, you can do that. So there's lots of ways of moving those notes and moving them around. Also, when you've got notes selected like this, if you click and drag, you can move them like this up and down on the staff as well. So if you need to repitch a whole bunch of things diatonically, you can also do that too. Now, somebody also asked about ties, which will also link into the thing we're about to do with lengthen and shorten notes. So if you have a note selected here, you'll notice one of the things I did earlier was just add a rhythm dot. If I just press the period key here, then it will make it longer, and if it needs a tie, it will add it. So Dorico will add ties just as and when they're needed. However, if you have 2 notes, if I press R, and I have 2 notes here and I want to tie them, you can press T for tie, and it will just tie them. So it's an option if you want it. Do not press this button here. This button here and is a slur. If you hover over it, it says it's S for slur. Somebody asked me the other day, why do all my tide notes sound? Why do I get, why is it playing all of the tide notes? And it's because they were using slurs accidentally instead of ties. So T for tie. Now, when you've got lengthening and shortening note values here, if I choose this note here, and I think in the notes, let me just check in section 18. Yes, if you choose a note here, I said before you could use the key editor down here, and let me just move me out of the way. You can make a note longer by dragging it like this, which will also add ties, and you can shorten it like this. But it's not all that accurate again because you're using a mouse and you've had to open this panel and everything else. So the shortcut for doing that is to do Option Shift or Alt Shift if you're on a Mac, if you're on a PC, and use the right arrow. And what that will do is it will lengthen it along the rhythm grid. So my rhythm grid is set to 8th notes down here currently. If you had it set to 16th, you'll get a different result. And every time I press the arrow key, it will lengthen the note along the rhythm grid, and it will give me the options accordingly. If I just hold down Alt and use the arrow keys from earlier this evening, it will move that note along the rhythm grid. And I can move it left and move it back again along the rhythm grid. It's moving in 8th notes along the bar. And if I hold down Shift, then I can extend along the rhythm grid, and I can contract it along the rhythm grid. So if I just press 8 now, it will jump back to where it was. So I very rarely enter ties. I put a note in that's roughly the value I want, and I either shorten it to make it what I want, because there's no point in adding 3 notes and adding ties to them. Just add a note that's close to what you want and do Alt Shift arrows, and you can lengthen and shorten to be what you want. So a note that hangs into the next bar, just do it that way. Enter a whole note, extend it into the next bar. A note that's slightly short for that bar, no problem. Enter a whole note, shorten it along the rhythm grid. So those are the options. So Option Shift or Alt Shift and the arrow keys will do that. Doubling and halving note values. If I choose a note, and if I use the Option Shift I was using and add Command or Control, then it will double the note value. So every time I press the button now, it will double the note value, which can be quite useful. You can do it by just saying, I have selected a quarter note. If I choose whole note, it becomes a whole note. Well, that's fine if it's one note. But what happens if you had a bar of notes which were all different? When you choose all of them and you double them all, well, you're going to lose a bunch of them. For starters, we have an option to solve that, which we're coming on to with insert mode. But it means you can operate on multiple note values all at the same time if you're using the double and half command, which is quite useful. There's a question about... Oh, sorry, hang on, a couple of questions. Going back to voices just very briefly, when adding voices, sometimes I need to include voices only on specific bars. So up to now, I've been adding new voices wherever needed, but I end up having lots of voices and colors. Yes, you only, think of each instrument individually. When you add a voice, you only need to add an extra, when you add a voice to that instrument, let's say you're working on the clarinet, you only need to add a second voice once, or if it's a piano, you only need to add a second voice once. Then you can just press V to toggle between the available voices. Even if you're 8, 64, however many bars later in the piece, you only need the voice then exists for that instrument. Can I do a seminar just on voices? Yes, potentially we could do a seminar just on voices. There are also some videos that Ant's done, my colleague, on those as well. Lengthening and shortening note values, will it automatically shift all the notes afterwards, or will it add rests? That's a very good question, because that's what we're about to do with insert mode here. So here is insert mode. What we have here is we've got some music here, and underneath we want to obviously make the same thing, but we were copying something and we accidentally looked away. The dog barked, the postman rang, who knows. You lost concentration for a minute, and then you entered the last bar and you missed out the middle two in the middle 2 bars. You could move this to the end to give yourself some space, but if you're composing, you might not actually know how much space you need in the middle. We're copying, which is slightly different, but if you're composing, you might not know how much time you want. So when you've got the caret line on here, I've just double clicked. If I press I for insert mode, and I get these extra little chevrons on the top and bottom of my carrots. And over here, we've got a button for insert mode. Now, insert mode can be dangerous, and I'll explain why in a second. But when we've got insert mode turned on, it means we can now insert music into here. And yes, Christopher, we'll add this to the lengthening and shortening notes in a second. So when I've got insert mode on here, I can now add more notes. So I can say I would like a quarter note, A, and it will add that, but it will push everything else out of the way. So it's rewriting these, and it will keep doing so until we get to the end. So I'll say C, A, half note, G, and I'll say a dotted F, and a G, and quarter note, E, and as we enter the last C, we then have exactly what we needed, and these notes have ended up where we wanted them. So insert mode can be really useful to put notes, insert them. It's exactly the same as using Microsoft Word, and you click in the middle of a word because you made a typo and you need to add a letter, and insert mode does exactly that, and it pushes everything else out of the way. If you press backspace, the same as in Microsoft Word, it will delete those notes and bring all of the other notes back in to alignment. So now this is dangerous. I'll explain why this is dangerous, because if I press escape, you don't know from here, but insert mode is still turned on. So this is dangerous, because if I now select this note, and if I extend this note using the extend shortcut I was using a minute ago, then it will extend and push all of these other notes out of the way. So it's changing the music later on. Now that's fine here, I can see it. But what happens if you had a couple of empty bars and then 8 bars later they were playing something and you've just shifted their music accidentally? So there is also a stop line to make sure you don't accidentally do this by accident. And you might find when you're doing things, if you press a shortcut, which is Option Shift I for insert mode, you'll get this red stop line. And now Dorico cannot change the music after that stop line. And if you get this by accident, Option Shift I, you can turn it on and off. There's also an option, you might have the system track of these grey options on sometimes. And in here, you can also find that these stop lines can be moved, and you can also turn them off from here as well, from the system track. The system track can be turned on and off from the view menu and the system track. It's on by default for new projects. So if you don't want it, for new projects, go to view and system track and you can turn it off. So there's a couple of different ways, but if you get that red line on by default, don't worry. It's only really to do with insert mode, and it's to make sure you don't destroy your music after that point by accident. So insert mode can be useful, can be dangerous, because if I don't have insert mode on and I choose this note and I say I want it to be an 8th note, I'll get an 8th note and a rest. If I just undo that, if I choose this note and I have insert mode on and I make this an 8th note, then I'll get an 8th note and I won't get a rest, and it will upset the rest of the music. Or maybe that's what you wanted. It will edit the rest of the music after it. So insert mode can be really useful. Play with it in a small example first so you can understand what's going on, because it's really useful. But of course, with great power comes great responsibility. So it's also up to you. Now we're on the home straight. Don't panic, anybody. Does anybody need a break for 2 minutes? Hands up if you'd like a break for 2 minutes. My dog says she's okay. That's not true. She's staring at the hedgehogs in the back garden and she's on guard, but I'm not going to let her out right now. So I'm going to carry on if that's okay with everybody else. Nobody said otherwise, so that's good. So what we're going to do now is cutting ties and note values. And we've kind of looked into this a little bit before, so this is going to be easy. So if I choose a note here and I press T, I can tie those 2 notes. If I choose this note here, I can press T and I can tie these notes. If I use the arrow keys, I can move on to the next note that I want to press T, and I can tie those notes. So you can just use T whenever you want to tie notes. When you want to untie notes, the shortcut is U, which might be for untie, but it actually happens to be this little scissors tool down here, and the shortcut is U because we ran out of shortcuts. So it's U. Well, let's call it untie, shall we? Because that's the easiest thing to remember right now. So if I select these notes here and I press U, then it says untie. You're correct, Chuck. My insert mode option is still turned on, but fortunately I'm not actually editing any of these. I'm just tying and untieing, so it doesn't matter, but that's a very good point. So now I'm going to move on and I'm going to press U, and then I'm going to move into these. I'm going to press U. So you can use T and U if you want to tie things and you want to untie things and cut them, which can be quite useful. Like I said, I don't actually use ties very often because I use the extend note duration, because I probably wouldn't have had one of those notes in there, and I just extend the note instead of pressing T. But there you go. You have more options. You can choose the one that you would like. Forced duration. This is not correct notation. It's another case of, like the beaming example we looked at earlier, if occasionally you need to force a note duration because it would make sense for the thing you're doing, I'm not going to, no judgment on when you use this. If you double click here, the problem is if you were to enter this rhythm by default, so I'm going to press 66, C, C, and 6, C, then I would get this, because in this time, in this meter, it's a correct rhythm. There are options, by the way, for all of the how Dorico will notate things for various rhythms. There is a whole options dialog for that, and which options it should pick. But let's say we want to override Dorico, so I'm going to delete these notes. I'm going to say I always want this to be dotted. I always want my 66 that I've chosen, my dotted quarter note. So I'm going to this press O, which is going to light up this G clamp, which is forced duration, because the shortcut is O. Because if you've used this, then it's really up to you what rhythms are going to go in at this point. So now I have forced duration turned on. I can press C, and I can keep pressing C, and I just want a standard note there, and I can press 66, forced duration still on, so it will enter exactly what I say because I'm forcing the duration. So if I press 55 and enter these notes, I will get exactly that, which is not the standard thing that Dorico would normally do. If you do it by accident, you can select these notes retrospectively, you can press O or this shortcut, and you can turn them off, and Dorico will give you the rhythm that you should get for the meter that you're in. But if you want it while you're doing note input, then you can use O for this forced duration. Again, it's another one you need to be careful when you're using it, but it can be really useful if you want it. So that's your shortcut, forced duration, which is O. There's a quick question. Oh, yes, when you're entering slurs, we're doing slurs in a minute. Can I come on to slurs in a minute? Let's do slurs in a minute. Let's do lock duration first. So with this lock duration, now what lock duration does, it's called something else in Sibelius and possibly in Finale, and I honestly cannot remember what it's called. Re-input pitches, maybe? What I'm going to do is I'm going to choose this note here. And when you're in note input mode, actually, I need the caret on, actually. I'll put the caret on. I want to input some notes in here. I've got exactly the right rhythm, but I don't have all of the right pitches. So let's say you were entering alto sax part 1, and now you copied it down to alto sax part 2, and you just need to put the new pitches in. So I'm going to use a MIDI keyboard for this one, but you can also do this on a QWERTY keyboard, no problem. What you will do is you will press L, which will give you the lock symbol, which is the lock duration. So locking the duration means that none of the durations will change. I don't need to enter any of the durations. All I need to do is play the new pitches on the MIDI keyboard I'm going to use. You can use the QWERTY one as well if you want to. It doesn't matter what time I do it in. It's going to keep exactly all of the durations, including all of the triplets. I'm moving out of triplets and everything else, and I'm just going to get exactly what I need. So it's a really quick way of entering that second, third, fourth instrument, which is exactly the same rhythm, but you need to put new pitches in. So that's the lock duration. The shortcut is L. The slurs and flipping items. I don't think he meant it like that, but that's the way it translated out of the German, flipping items. So when you want to enter slurs, if you're doing it this way, I'll do it another way in a second, but if you're doing it this way, where you've put the notes in first and then you want to enter slurs, you can choose this note here, hold down Shift, and then click on this note here. And when I press S, then it will input a slur. You can also use this slur button over here. So I'll choose this note here. I'll hold down Shift, click on this note here, and then I'll press S. Now, when you've got slurs and things that you want to flip the other side, the shortcut is F. So if you choose a note or a beam, if you choose a beam, it selects all the notes, which is kind of useful, but you can just select one of them if you want to and press F. Then it will flip that one, And if you choose a slur and flip it, then you can also flip a slur. So you can decide which way around you want that to be, and you can decide which way around you want the slur to be if you wanted to flip it for some reason. So you can choose a note and flip them, you can choose a slur and you can flip them with F. The slurs here, you can also use the same shortcut we were using for note length and note extensions. So extending notes, Option Shift or Alt Shift, and the arrow keys will also extend and contract slurs, which is also really useful. And I think what Elizabeth was asking is if I just delete this whole bar, when I'm inputting notes, some people prefer to enter slurs at the same time. So you would choose a 16th note, you would press S for slur to turn the slurs on. You'll see they've lit up over here as well. And now when I input notes, it will also add and extend a slur as I'm going. So I'm just keep on entering notes and I've got that. Now I want to stop the slur. I have to press Shift S to stop the slur because I then want to start a new slur so that I can press S again and a new note duration and do it that way. Oops, sorry. I should have entered the other bit first. Should have entered the, sorry. There's me talking and doing things at the same time. I stopped the slur. I can enter a note. I can press S and now I can carry on and it will enter the slur for me. Okay. So you does mean that you have to press Shift S to end a slur, then you could enter the next note, press S and continue with the slurs if you wanted it. So that's an extra one. Some people really prefer that one. I don't normally use it. I normally put the notes in first and then put the slurs in. It really depends how you think. So there you go. Elizabeth, no problem. That's you. Articulations. Last 2 or 3 sections now. So articulations. Now, the articulation buttons, I have written these in the shortcut file because we need to make this a bit clearer. So this is what my keyboard looks like. Look, you can see my keyboard here. My articulation shortcuts here. I have a very large enter key. Let me just move that nearer the camera for you. You see, I have a very large enter key here. This is not probably what you've got in the US. So my articulations are these 4 buttons here. The articulations are these buttons over here on the left-hand side of the screen. And so they are these 4 buttons for me here. Now, what I think you probably have, a lot of you on this call, is this kind of enter key. So these 4 articulation options here, it should be 1, 2, 3, 4, but the 4th one has had to move because your enter keys are different shape, so it's moved up here. So these are your articulation keys if you want to use them as shortcuts. If you're using a different keyboard layout, then they may be in, again, slightly different places. But these are the ones you're looking for. So this is, I've put this in the shortcut notes so that you have a good idea of where those are. So I'll just show you these using them as shortcuts. You can, of course, choose a note and you can choose an articulation over here. You can also do it during note input if you want to. I'm going to choose all of these and I'm going to press the staccato dot button here because it will add staccato. I'm then going to use the right arrow and then I can use the accent and I can use staccato dot and I can also use tenuto, which is the one underneath. And I can use staccato dot for these 2. And you can choose the fastest way you want to enter these articulations like this. So this is, when you're entering them for the first time, how you can do them. Now, also, there's a bunch of other ones which are less common. So these ones, for example, we have stressed, we have staccatissimo, we have unstressed, and we have staccato tenuto. If you want these ones, it's exactly the same 4 buttons, but you hold down Shift when you're using them. So if I hold down Shift, and you can use the left shift, the right shift if you want, or the left shift depending on how you want to do it. And you can use these buttons here. So you've got the shortcuts, and you can enter exactly the same options that you had like that. And if you want staccato tenutos, then you can do them the same way that way. And you can also do accents and you can do staccatos at the same time. So you can add you can have more than, in some of these cases, you can have more than one articulation anyway. So all good. You have your articulations. However, let me just back up for a minute. What do you mean there's only one way of doing things? Not so. So if I got all of these notes in, I then put some other notes in. Let's say these are different pitches. Let's use lock duration and say these are, a whole bunch of other things, and they could be chords or they could be absolutely anything we like. I'm going to choose these notes here. And I've selected these notes. I'm going to press copy, Control C. And then I'm going to choose these notes down here. And instead of paste, I'm going to use edit, paste special, paste articulations. And I like this so much, I've made a shortcut for it. And it's going to paste in the articulations from this line down here. It's not pasting any of the notes. It leaves the notes exactly where they are. You're just pasting the articulations. It also works if there are some notes missing. So if the rhythms don't exactly line up. So let's say that one wasn't there and that chord wasn't there and that note wasn't there, for example. You can still select all of these, you can paste them, you can select these ones down here, and you can use paste articulations with whatever shortcut you decided to use, and it will paste in all of the correct articulations. And where there's a note missing, it'll just skip that one, so it doesn't mess up the articulations. It knows where they were supposed to be. So that's for all of the articulations. Quick question from somebody about how you add a fermata pause mark. So they are over here in this panel on the right hand side for holds and pauses, and they're just there. But you can also do them, so you can choose a note or you can choose a rest, and you can then add a fermata from over there, or you can use the Shift H holds option and you can type pause, and you can do it that way as well if you want that. Rhythmic notation. We're nearly there, people. Don't panic. We're nearly there. Rhythmic notation, this is basically an extra voice. So I'm going to double click here, and instead of using Shift V, which would add an up or down stem voice, I'm going to do Shift Alt V, the shortcuts on the shortcut guide. So now I have a slash voice. I'm adding a slash voice. And so now I can say I want a 16th. It doesn't matter what pitch you press, literally anything you like, really doesn't matter. Choose any note you like. Just whatever's closest to you on the keyboard is fine. And you can enter these, and you can enter all of these as if they are notes, because it's just a new voice. Now, don't forget, you've also, if you press V, you can now toggle between your upstem voice, your standard notes, and your rhythm slashes. Don't create more rhythm slashes than you need. Just toggle between the voices you've now made available for this instrument. So I can type them like this, and I could continue typing the same things with that way. However, when you've then got this type of slash notation, it's much quicker not to type them out as an extra voice. You can just select these two bars, and you can type Shift R for the repeats popover, and you can just type slash, and that will give you a slash region. Slash regions, you can use exactly the same shortcut to lengthen and shorten a slash region as you did for notes. So Option and Shift, and the left and right arrows will lengthen and shorten a slash region, but you can just use them with Shift R in the popover and type slash. Bar repeats can be done in a very similar way. So for bar repeats, I can select this bar, and if I just do one bar and do Shift R for the repeats popover again, instead of typing slash this time, I just type %. So for me, it's Shift and 5 because that's where the percent item is, and that gives me a % item. I can make this longer and shorter with exactly the same shortcuts I had previously, so Option Shift. I can also select this bar and select here, and then do Shift R and just do %, and it will give me a bar repeat. I am also amused that the German word for this actually translates as lazy people. So the German word is Faulenzer, and it's lazy people. And I wondered what my colleague was talking about when I got to the end of the training session and he called me a lazy person. But it's their word for bar repeat, because we're being lazy. Dorico will also play these back for you with no problem. So you can play this bar and it will play you this bar, and this bar will also play. You don't have to put any notes in or anything else. It will automatically play you the notes because you've put this symbol in. If you want a 2-bar repeat and you select these 2 bars, you can do Shift R, and you can do %2, and that will give you a 2-bar repeat. If you wanted a 4-bar repeat, I can't because I don't have 4 bars, but anyway, if I did, I could select all 4 of these, and I could do Shift R and do %4, and it would give me a 4-bar repeat, which is now slightly confusing because the first 2 would... Yeah, don't do that. But if you needed a 4-bar, then you can do that symbol, and they will also play back as well if you need them to play back. While I'm talking about playback, if you're doing slashes and you write notes in there first... So let's say we put a scale in here. Oops, sorry. Oh, I should have looked up. Wrong voice. There we go. If we put some notes in there first, and then we put a slash region over the top, you will still hear the notes on playback. So if you write a solo and put chord symbols, that kind of thing, and slashes on it, you will still hear the solo that you wrote, but the player will see slashes and then they can play their own. So you can then get the correct audio rendition of that when you make an audio version of it. And like I said, bar repeats, they also play back. So you don't have to write out the notes or anything else. You literally just put these symbols in with a Shift R popover. So we're basically getting to the end. I'm just going to put in the chat my email address. Don't email me all at the same time. There's a lot of you, but there is my email address in the chat. It's j.baron@steinberg.de if you have any questions after this session. The next session, I think this has generally gone okay. So I think what we'll do for the next session is, I know it said the next session was session 2 was also full, but we'll do the same again. We'll open it up for more tickets so that you can get the details to come into the Zoom session. The first 100 people will be able to join the Zoom session, but then anybody will be able to join on the YouTube link anyway. So don't worry if you didn't get a ticket for lesson 2. Session 2 is going to be about taking some of those techniques that we've done and making an arrangement. So we're going to be doing things like, key signatures and adding lyrics and, adding all of the other things, not just the note input type thing, and all of those kind of things. When is the next session? The next session is next Saturday, which will be the 20th, at the same time. There is an Eventbrite, but I think it's already full. So in the next, I'll try and do it today, but it is also my evening at the moment on Saturday. If not today, then soon, I'll make sure that there are more tickets available for that one. It will also be available on the YouTube channel, which is youtube.com/Dorico. Hang on a second. So you can do that one. I'm just going to take a copy of the chat now as well. So I've saved the chat. So I can make that available if people need it. If it doesn't appear automatically when you finish this session, then if nothing else, email me. And if we end up with tons and tons of emails, then I'll end up probably putting the chat somewhere for the the resources and the downloads that we've done. So the next session is going to be on more things. Somebody's just asked about key signatures. We're going to do some things on things like adding key signatures and lyrics and various other things that you would need to make an arrangement. We're going to be actually adding instruments at the beginning and that kind of thing. How do you add instruments? We're going to be building up a little arrangement of various things. I'm not necessarily going to be telling you exactly how to do all of the note input things, because I'd hope from the session we've done today, you can pick some of the things that you've also been, your favorite way of doing note input from all of the options that we've given you. Just once again on on these downloads. So the file that we've been using, you can download another version of that. If you want to practice and do all of this again, that's a very good idea. The notes and the shortcuts that I've used today are in this notes section. If you want to change any of your shortcuts, then it doesn't really make Dorico more intuitive, but it might really help you. If your muscle memory works that way and you want to change some of the shortcuts, then there's a file to how to do that. I would really recommend also the First Steps Guide. If you want to dive into this in a good way, then the First Steps Guide link will take you here. The First Steps Guide is available as an online web help or a downloadable PDF, which I think is probably the preferred option for a lot of people. And there's also me covering this in a live stream, actually 2 live streams. But the first one is the piano piece. And you'll see me do it and go through all of the options if you're not sure about anything that's in there. But really, all of the shortcuts and everything that you would need are in this downloadable PDF. So it'll work through. It looks like it's a big guide, but that's because there are so many details. It tells you all of the things you need to know, all of the key commands, shortcuts that we need. And when you start a new project, it literally tells you all of the shortcuts and it has all the screenshots and everything that you would need to be able to do that project. So that is another good option. But what we'll be doing in the next session of this next week, this time next week is we'll be building an arrangement and a couple of different options for an arrangement so that you can follow me along. And again, it will be recorded. You can go over it multiple times. You can go over it at your own speed and all of that kind of thing. But we'll be taking a lot of these note input things that we've been working on today and building on that to actually create your own arrangements in Dorico. Obviously, initially, it will be some arrangement of something that I will be, showing you initially. So hopefully that's useful as well. But we'll do something that's a little bit more classical in the way it's set up, but also with a nod to kind of, the jazz and some of the other kind of notations that you would need if you were doing arrangements that way. So whether it's a lead sheet or a quartet or even something much bigger, then that will be useful. The YouTube channel is just called Dorico. Somebody's just asked about that one. So there is, if you scroll up the chat, and I'll put it in there again, youtube.com/Dorico is the YouTube channel. And then if you have any problems getting in via Zoom, you can watch it on YouTube and go through on there. And I hope this session has been useful either way, whichever way you've decided to watch it. I'm really pleased that so many of you could join today and that you could join live, and that you've got your chance to ask questions and everything else. So I hope that's also been useful. If you have any problems technically on, well, my MIDI keyboard doesn't work, or I can't get sound, or that kind of thing, then send me an email. Obviously there's only me, so bear with me if I don't get back to you instantly, and it is currently 9:30 on a Saturday evening, so it might not be today when I get back to you either. But yes, we will help you with those options. Tell me, are you using a Mac or a PC? What is your MIDI keyboard? How is it connected to the computer, for example? Or if you're having problems with sound and options, I may initially respond with, we have a link to a troubleshooting guide. Normally for sound, if you're not getting any sound at all, if you just go to the edit menu and you go to device setup, then what you need to do is just pick the right, as it's called, an ASIO driver. It's the correct output here. And you may have one or more options listed. What you will find by default with Dorico is that it doesn't necessarily use your default speaker output, because Dorico, often people have one output that they'd use just for YouTube or something, but they have a specific option that they'd want Dorico to use, maybe with some better speakers. So you do need to choose that specific option in this dialog to say which device you want to use, and if you have an option for more than one. Often there's not more than one stereo output, but there might be. So that's normally the basic options. And normally, if you just choose those correct options for the output you want and press close, that's normally all you need. When you press play on the green play button, you'll hear everything you need. If not, then let me know and we'll sort it out. So thank you very much for joining. Yes, you can join this live on YouTube. It will now also be recorded. So if you want, if Eventbrite doesn't tell you a link for this, or there isn't a link somewhere, I will make sure that's available. And if you aren't sure, I think the best place to look, because I will be able to put a link on there, is on this session materials page. I'll be able to put a link in here that says, here's the recording of the Saturday session that we did. I'm also redoing this session